Ave Stoner Squad, my name is DanIsStoned, and thank you for joining me today for another Imperator Rome video. Today's topic is all about culture, a notoriously tricky aspect of the game to master due to the sheer complexity of the system and the multitude of different cultures present in Imperator Rome. In this video I shall explain how the cultural system works, the difference between integrated and non-integrated pops, as well as the benefits and downsides of integrating pops of a certain culture into your realm. So strap yourselves in and let's dive right into the video. First of all, in order to understand how to manage cultures in game, we need to have a basic grasp of the culture system in Imperator Rome. The ancient world is dominated by a multitude of cultures, and these cultures are grouped together to form culture groups. The cultures are text written in the culture map mode and are grouped together to form what is called a culture group, represented by a certain colour on the culture map mode. For instance, the light green colour represents the Gaelic culture group. Within this culture group there are a series of cultures that are text indicated, such as the Volcae, Soluvian or Helvetian cultures among others, that make up the overall cultures belonging to the Gaelic culture group. In a nutshell, you have a general culture group that is then split into a series of subcultures. These cultures within culture groups are directly tied to pops and characters. What I mean by this is that every pop type and every character in the game belongs to a culture within an overall culture group. Overall pops cultures are managed in the culture tab. It is in this section where you can see a breakdown of the different cultures in your realm. Now do bear with me here, this is the part that can get a little complicated and it tends to be where most of the players are having difficulties understanding. I will try to be as clear and simple as possible. In this tab you can see your realm's primary culture, your overall number of pop types, the cultures present in your realm, along with the number of pops and types of pops that belong to each culture. You can also enact certain decisions for each culture, set a culture's civic rights, as well as find the location of all the pops that are of a certain culture. Now the most important part of this tab is the civic rights section. It is here where you set the civic status of pops that are of a certain culture. What you are essentially doing by setting a civic right is authorising pops of a certain culture to promote up to the specified civic right. For example, in this case my Epirote pops have been set to citizen civic rights. This means that pops present in my realm that belong to the Epirote culture will be allowed to promote up to citizens. They will not be allowed to go beyond that threshold. If I wanted my Epirote pops to promote up to nobles, then I would have to set them as noble civic rights. If I were to change the civic rights of the Epirote pops to freemen, then the pops of Epirote culture would not be able to promote beyond the freeman category. If any Epirote pops are of a citizen or noble status, then they would be demoted to freeman over time. Civic rights basically allow you to determine the category of pops you wish a certain culture to have. Do you want a certain culture to be only slaves driving your economy? Then set civic rights to slaves. What about a certain culture being your manpower driving force? Then set them to freemen. Need extra research points and research efficiency? Then consider setting a culture for citizens or nobles. Just remember, the integration process is done over time, and while the integration is going on, you take a monthly hit to your stability, as well as costing you 5 political influence in order to start the integration process. It is also worth mentioning that integrated culture pops are safe from assimilation, meaning that you will not be able to change their culture to your realm's primary culture. Now, setting cultures to the citizen or noble civic rights allows me to talk about integrated pops. Any pops that you have set to a citizen or noble civic right are considered to be integrated into the realm. Your primary culture is automatically set to integrated, and any cultures with a citizen or noble civic right becomes integrated over time. The integration speed can be sped up using decisions such as protection against torture or the right of inheritance, for example. But what does setting cultures to an integrated status do? Well, the first thing it does is affect the overall happiness of the pops and the characters that are of the integrated culture. An integrated culture automatically provides pops with that culture a boost to their happiness. Of course, the happier the pops means they are more productive, but they also produce less unrest. For example, you will notice that my Epirote pops are provided with a plus 30% bonus to their happiness, since their civic rights are set as citizens, thus making them integrated pops. But be careful not to integrate everyone. For each culture you integrate besides your primary culture, hand you with a penalty to each integrated culture's happiness. Here you can see that my integrated pops are hit with a minus 16% to their culture happiness because I have 4 cultures that have the integrated status due to their civic status being set as citizens. If I were to remove the civic rights from one of them, then I would lose a 4% negative modifier, upping the culture happiness of the other integrated pops to 34%. It's important to note that integrating cultures to noble status hands you a 5% penalty and not 4%, so do take that into account. Of course, the opposite is true. Set any culture to slaves and that culture takes a hit to their happiness. Freeman's civic right is like the middle ground, offering no negative effects on the culture's happiness. All non-integrated pops are called unintegrated cultures and have lower culture happiness than the integrated cultures. Integrated and unintegrated culture happiness can be increased through inventions, so do keep an eye out for those. I also mentioned that it also affects character happiness. What I mean by that is that the happier the culture, the more the characters that follow that culture gain a small loyalty boost. However, the opposite is true. The less happy a certain culture is, then the bigger the hit to a character who follows that culture's loyalty. Integrated culture pops also affect your capacity to levy troops, since you can only levy troops from integrated cultures. The more integrated culture pops in a region, then the bigger your levies. This is also true with legions because your maximum legion size depends on the number of integrated pops in the region in which the legion was raised. Legions also pull pops away from levies, so keep that in mind when creating legions. You get more control over the unit types, but you are pulling them away from the levies, so as your legion grows, then the number of troops available to the levy diminishes. The final thing that integrated pops do affect is your research efficiency, and thus the speed at which you gain tech levels. Research efficiency is only affected by pops that belong to an integrated culture, so any nobles or citizens that belong to a non-integrated culture do not count towards your research efficiency, and besides, they will demote over time anyway. Now begs the question, who and when do I integrate? Well, there is no real answer to this. Your best bet is to experiment a bit, but I do tend to follow these rules. I like to integrate pops of a culture that are numerous. The more I have, then the more levies and research points I will generate, so prioritise these. Once you gain access to the inventions that allow you to build grand temples and theatres, I would personally prioritise integrating pops of foreign culture groups. Why? Well, pops that are of your culture group are easier to keep happy, meaning you do not need to waste your integrated culture status on them. Unintegrated culture pops that are part of your culture group have higher base happiness than unintegrated pops of a different culture group. Of course, if your land only has pops that belong to your culture group, then integrate the cultures that have the highest pop count. Integrating pops that are not of your culture group will offset the negative modifiers applied to their happiness due to the pops not being part of your culture group and or religion, thus reducing unrest and the risk of disloyal provinces and thus rebellions. It will also allow you to levy different types of units, since each culture can levy different types of cohorts. To see this, just hover your mouse cursor over the icon next to the Set Civic Status button to see what type of units an integrated culture can levy in a region. This also allows you to mix it up a bit in terms of unit types. Also, do not worry about integrating the wrong culture. Depending on the evolution of your realm, you can demote pops of a certain culture, revoking their integrated culture status. Just remember that if you revoke the integrated status, then you lower the pops of that culture's happiness. They also will not count as troops available to levy, and of course will not be taken into account for your research efficiency, so do keep this in mind. Well, that's about it for this video. I hope it helped you all understand cultures a little bit better and how the integration system works. If it did, then please consider giving the video a thumbs up, and if you want to see more Imperator Rome guides and content, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. Anyway, with all that said and done, thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you all in the next one. Bye for now.